Got it.
I used to live in Fort Myers. Place was massacred.
I'll bet it is.
Just one of many.
It helped encourage us to move to North Carolina
As long as it's inland.
and not along the shoreline, Gary.
Hey, it's beautiful here most of the time, except during hurricanes.
Hello there, Phil Johnson.
Hi, David. Just got some birth certificates. I'm printing them off now. Never ends.
Real ones, or did you just make them up?
I'll never say.
I know I shouldn't have.
You know you shouldn't ask, David.
Does it say male?
God, I better check that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you better.
Thomas may not be a male.
I've noticed that the birth certificates that say male don't say the parents. So then you have to prove the birth certificate relates to the father.
It says sex of M, whatever that is.
Yeah,
That'll
that's
have
an
to
issue.
do. That'll have to do.
It's
I had
close.
one grandmother's application, grandmother's birth certificate that said male on it. But fortunately, we didn't have to worry about that.
You know, in this day and age, who knows?
That's true.
Speaking of all that, I'm now on my third incident of husbands applying on the same application. So I just changed wife to spouse, and everything seemed to work.
It really should be spouse.
Yeah, it's put spouse instead of well, I couldn't put wife, but I put spouse.
So which application form allowed you to do that?
Well, the Word document, which I'm
Yep,
pretty,
that's what I've used to do exactly the same thing. I think that's the only way you can do it.
yeah, I haven't tried it on the online.
Yeah, the
mean, on the
old Word document will allow you to do that.
You
It-
can't
it-
change
we need-
anything online. You're stuck.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
we
is
do
what it
need to
is.
change that to spouse.
And I hate when it won't let you number the wife correctly.
Right.
It seems like they shouldn't have the spouses numbered. We should be able to number them ourselves or don't number them at all.
Let's see.
But that's just an opinion. Right, Bill?
Sounds good.
That's what it is, and we appreciate them.
As I said last week, I got a guy that's got 5 wives. You know, so I just took them all off. I mean, I can't go through the process of,
Well, the only one you should be interested in is the one that's the wife of the kids, just in case the kids. apply.
correct, but you can't say that because the kids you're not allowed to talk about the kids unless the kid applies. So I took them all off.
Well, I had an applicant that had 4 wives and children by 3 of them, I think, and he wanted the kids to be able to file later on, so he wanted to put all the women on, 2 of whom were not married to him.
You know, they have to submit a separate fee and that way you get money for your. Otherwise, put no wives and they got to prove it.
Yeah.
Even wives from old age can be important because the death certificate may be in the married name of a later husband.
I have one like that.
I guess that's the root of our sexist organization. We are men and we shall rule the world. There we go.
Oh, here we go.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. This is Gary Green, Genealogist General, and I welcome you to Registrar Genealogist Training, Genealogy Research Best Practices. This is called Bait and Switch. I picked the wrong title for what I put on my
What's that?
or on the invitation.
No,
but,
I'm watching this, I think I'm watching this training.
Okay, if you'll look at the your screen, try to find the mute button and mute yourselves at this time. Also look for the chat button to be able to ask questions as the presentation is going along. And then later on, we'll be using the reactions, and you'll need to find the raise hand button to be able to talk after we get through with our presentation. Our guest speaker again tonight is Dennis Van Wormer from Michigan. And Dennis, when you're ready, go ahead and take control.
All right, thank you, Gary. Let's see. All right, you should have the screen up now. As Gary said, tonight's topic is genealogy research best practices, and actually some resources we're going to talk about too. This is our fourth session, as it says, of 6. My name is Dennis Van Wormer. I'm the state genealogist for Michigan. And as we did the last 3 weeks, this will be about a 1-hour presentation, and we'll have about a half hour available for questions that Gary Green will moderate from the chat session or from the hands up. I have had some other inputs by email. I'm very happy to receive them. If you have critiques, suggestions, comments after tonight, feel free to send me an email on the email right there, which is also on my page on the member database. So let's get started. Here's our agenda for tonight. Again, we'll be talking about both good resources and good practices for research. As I am wont to do, I'd like to again start with a little bit of information from the Board for Certification of Genealogists. They have a standards book that they put out, and it covers both process standards and product standards. And these are the categories of their process standards. And to me, it's a good, thoughtful process to start. The very first one, stated objectives, in a sense, is kind of obvious to us because our usual stated objective is to prepare is to prepare a complete SAR application with acceptable documentation. But as people make comments before the thing, as we talk about, often you'll get into an application and you'll have some specific issue that you'll need to determine, even on what might be considered a single question. This is a good process to follow to keep yourself on target, to state your objective. Make sure, and what I do is even write down your own question. What am I looking for in this bit of research? Sometimes it's obvious and you can go right there, but sometimes it helps to get your mind clear as to exactly what you're looking for. And again, as you go down there, collecting data and reasoning from evidence, you'll see, once again, we're talking about sources, information, and evidence as you go through researching and preparing this application. I'm not going to go into more detail here, but it is available. That book is relatively, the good news for standards book, it's very small, but also it's relatively inexpensive and a good resource for you to have. Okay, let's start with this. It may seem a little weird to you, but I'm starting with this slide. As I go through these slides, I'll be talking about my personal experience and what I've gleaned from others from a number of resources. Some resources I use a lot, others I rarely use. But I'm always looking for additional good sources. So please feel free to mention them in the chat area, or just again send me an email after we go through here if there's something that you think I should add to the list. I start with, okay, wait a minute. Somebody doesn't have their thing muted. So we will take care of that down here. Come on. Hopefully that takes care of, oops. Hopefully that takes care of everybody. Let's try this again. Okay, back at it. So I use the DAR GRS very frequently, and this is usually very often where I start because frankly, it's got the best information and the highest quality information and the most information in for a lot of what you're looking for, especially from the Patriot. So just to go through the details, you can go to dar.org, click on the GRS button, the green box at the top. The main searches, ancestor, member. Problem I have with member is you can only put the member number in on this one. Why is it? Not the name or descendants. You can get all sorts of ancestor information. Key point, if you're new to this one, to remember is that what DAR does is what shows on GRS from their, especially for lineage, but especially for the Patriot ancestor, is corrected, their latest, correct, and best data. So whatever is up there is what they consider correct, or if they have a problem, they'll have a notation up there that there is a data issue. And by the way, just keeping in mind that this is one of the reasons why we suggest that you always go with the newest record copy that you can use if you're using a given one for an ancestor, because that will have the most correct data in the lineage too, if there is changes. Just like SAR, DAR will correct the lineage or the Patriot information online, but they don't go back and correct the actual record copy. So one area to watch out for is getting a record copy that doesn't have the same information that you had online. Okay, descendants, they usually redact the newest 3 generations. I think it's 70, unless it's been 75 years since the birth of the applicant. I'm not sure. Some people tell me it's going to 100. I've heard 75, but for most of any recent types, you're not going to see the first 3 generations. And we've been through some of this before. You can do a record copy. There may or may not be supporting documentation available for purchase. Unfortunately, you can't view online the documentation, and there's the information which we've gone through before on the cost of getting record copies or supporting documentation. But a good point I always like to make is, even if it costs you something, if it's important in a given area, a record copy, even if it doesn't have everything approved, may document sources that help you to do further research. Now, in addition to those main three searchable areas on the GRS, there are a number of other ones as you scroll down that are more specific, but can give you some good information. There's 5 that I list there below the top 3. The GRC, which stands for the Genealogical Records Committee, they put out reports, and there's an index there. Bibles, but a lot of family Bibles and some other family information. They do a lot of work transcribing or digitizing that information and making it available. Various records and indexes on various Revolutionary War categories. Again, many of these indexes, you can't use them as actual proof, but it will give you information and hopefully lead you on to something else that you can use for an actual proof document. Various other resources, different projects they've had, things they're doing, and they have an overall library catalog for the DAR library. Again, big reminder at the bottom, many of these things that are indexes, or like it says, descendants database search, if you go in there and find something, Patriot Index, they have some old time DAR lineage books. These are not acceptable as proof documents for SAR application, but you may find information there that helps you in your travels to find the information you need and find an acceptable source. Similarly, Patriot Research System, we're still a little behind on them as we're getting things finished up, but it's basically the same. A real big plus that I have for the PRS is the fact that if you're looking for a member, you don't have to have the number. You can have just the member's name and still find that person's Patriot or Patriots and work your way there. So I think that's a big plus of the PRS over the DAR GRS. You got various informations. They also have Patriot biographies and grave details, which both of them, I guess you call them incomplete. They're always pushing to get more information, but it's voluntary to submit biographies, for instance. What I do for myself is I push for all new members that I help is to write that biography. I think it's 500 words or less, and submit it. Even if it doesn't have sources, it might give you a piece of information or might give somebody else a piece of information they need as they're doing their research. Again, record copy information, same reason that the record copies or the PRS may help you in your research. And if you actually log in as a member, there are what they call PRS extended access capabilities for members. There's various statistics. There's a way to locate Patriot graves by GPS, and I think there's a couple of new ones, but that's something you can look through and see what else you can get. Likewise, not on the PRS itself, but because SAR websites organize a little differently, but on the SAR website, there are a host of other resources and information that can help you in your search. Most of them are under, if you go to the home page and click on the genealogy, pull down up at the top, and you can go to genealogy resources or Revolutionary War research, Revolutionary War tax research. And here are several items. I think I just put the names down there to give you an idea what's there. The first couple there, exploring death documentation, which did not have an author behind it. but genealogy research methods and research resources that Denise Hall did, I guess it's 5 or 6 years ago now. Good information about how to go around and how to do some research. Denise's document is excellent, much more detailed than I can go in here tonight, but gives you lots of details and tips on how to do the research and a reasonable method to follow along to do it. The next four, well, 3 of the next 4 anyway, past genealogist general John Sinks, and in some cases, some other, like for the tax reports, had some other help. Did a lot of work putting together essentially policy papers on things such as proving the Point Pleasant service. So if you find yourself with a patriot or somebody you're trying to prove is a patriot and you're having difficulty with more conventional proof, military service or something like that, how to use taxes as evidence of patriotic service, specific on Virginia land certificates to which apparently, as I understand it, I've never used it myself, but as I understand it, if somebody had a Virginia land certificate, that infers or guarantees supposedly that they took an oath of allegiance, and that's still allowable, and some tax records. A number of things that a lot of people, I believe, miss or not aware of it, but there's a lot of good pieces of information and research capability right on the SAR.org website for you to use and see if it applies to you. Finally, same reminder, various things from the PRS website and some of these other, if they're an index or something like that, the actual thing right on the website may not be acceptable itself as a proof documentation, but may be very useful in leading you to where to go find something such as a Virginia land certificate to get that evidence. Excuse me, get that proof document. Okay, now beyond SAR and DAR, we have a number of other websites and sources. I mentioned Ancestry.com next because this happens to be my #1 resource after DAR and SAR. Again, just so everybody knows, that's a paid subscription, has an extensive set of resources. There's a very interesting, at least, collection of old applications, a partnership or collaboration that was undergone several years ago between SAR and Ancestry, and I think even somebody else, where they basically digitize or photograph those and make them available. I found one of my ancestors from 1906, and it was very neat to see it. But it was also very his submission of documentation was what I would call an excellent example of creative essay writing. It really wasn't a documentation. He just went on for a page about his person, who our common ancestor, who at that point in time was like his, I think was his grandfather. So it was pretty well acceptable. Keeping in mind, one of the big things that I've run into and you'll run into with people that think they're doing their own research is that undocumented user-submitted family trees are not acceptable as proof. You may be able to contact the person that submitted them if they are willing to be contacted and find out some of it, but just claiming that Ancestry, this family tree says that so-and-so is the parent of so-and-so, not acceptable. Even though it's paid subscription, Ancestry is available free at any number of libraries. So you can always check with your local library to see if it's available in their building. Now, in many of the cases, there are free resources that are equivalent or similar to the paid ones. In this case, FamilySearch.org is the free equivalent of, or essentially equivalent of Ancestry. It was created and it's supported by the Church of Latter-day Saints. Open to anyone to use. One point to remember is that it has extensive resources also, but its resources and Ancestry resources are not exactly the same. So if you try one and don't find it, like I do, I go to Ancestry, but if I can't find something, this is a second spot for me to go and see if I get lucky, and FamilySearch.org has something that Ancestry doesn't. Likewise, undocumented user-submitted family tree is not acceptable. And I've put these last 3 points down. They have quite a complex way of what they call different sites. There's affiliate libraries, history centers, search centers, family search libraries, and it depends on how big they are and how much, what they have in the way of resources. But there is a family search wiki on that website, and it gives you the information of what the differences are. So if you're looking for a spot in your locale, this will help you understand what may or what is in that given facility. Okay. Now, just a number of other ones I won't go through in detail, but these ones that I or others have found to be useful. Fold3.com for military records is at the top of my list. So is newspapers.com. We've talked about this in 1 or 2 previous sessions. It's doesn't have everything, but I have a subscription to that, and seems like every few weeks they come up and say, okay, we've added newspapers from this city and this state from this year to that year, and they're always adding stuff on there. And a couple of people mentioned before that they have an excellent format for giving you copies of full pages or actual articles, and with a format around it, especially top and bottom, that gives you the citation information that you need and that the staff genealogist will accept. So it's excellent, but it's again paid, although if you get on their newsletter thing or pay attention, sometimes they'll be available, such as on holidays to try for a weekend. The rest of these, again, that's newspapers.com is the paid subscription. chroniclingamerica.loc.gov is from the Library of Congress. That's the LOC free database of many newspapers. And Genealogy Bank, American Ancestors from the New England Historic Genealogy Society. And we have NARA, archives.gov, excellent one if you can get stuff out of them these days. It's been a bit of a challenge having that come back up, but if you can find the information online, then it's very useful. If you have to order something, last I knew it was still pretty slow or non-existent. And then revwarapps.org, just a huge listing on their page of pension statements and rosters by person's name from Southern campaigns. So if you're looking for something for somebody from the South or in the Southern campaign, excellent resource to look there also for proof of service. And a few more. Some of these got a little weird. Worldcat.org, very good resource for finding, trying to locate books and libraries that may have them. Archives.org, I find it fun. Historical records, archives, and free rap music is what they claim anyway. I've never tried that part myself. In Michigan, we have and obviously available to anybody, but the University or Library of Michigan has had a project going to digitize everything they've got eventually, mel.org, GenWeb, and these other two, all good sites, although, many of them are going for a particular niche. But there's a lot of different sites and just a good list for you to be aware of, and keep on your list as places to possibly look. Okay, let's see. Now, I'm going to continue with some more, but I'm also going to, in these next several slides, I'm going to bring up the genealogy committee policies, primarily 5.4000, because this is getting back to what's admissible evidence for proof of lineage, and we'll have a little bit on proof of service. So the first one there, the two sub bullets, those are right out of the actual policy. Those are the official policy. So focusing on the fact that it needs to be something off the tombstone inscription. It needs to be a tombstone that appears to be erected contemporary with the time period of death. And in the case of find a grave, if you have it, it'll give you the name and location of the cemetery, which SAR likes to have as part of that. Readable photographs, strongly preferred to transcriptions and abstracts. I find that a lot of them are good, but there are some on there that really need to be cleaned and have a picture retaken. So I just had one from a applicant here about 2 weeks ago, and I had to tell him to go back and try it again because he sent me a photograph, but it had so much, it was so dirty and had some whatever you call them, growth on the face, that there was no way you could read it. So this next point was mentioned before too, but the thing to keep in mind is, although you can't use the user entered lineage most of the time, often there'll be an email address of whoever entered it that you can try to contact and find out what they might have in actual documentation or where they found their information. Or you do occasionally, although I found not a lot, will find a copy of a vital record or a newspaper article or something like that on the memorial page that you can use. Again, this is where you can start linking things together, seeing what you find on the PRS, and then using the names in the lineage on the PRS to see if you can find a trail of memorial pages through Find a Grave that help you make your case. Another possible source is always the cemetery sexton, or whatever the government, or even in some cases private body is that is in charge of that cemetery. So let's see. Oh, and I kind of focused on Find a Grave here, but certainly any other way of obtaining pictures of the tombstones, including taking them yourself if you go there, that's acceptable, given the same requirements that they have to be readable, appropriately contemporary with the time of death. And if at all possible, if you're taking pictures yourself, take a picture of the sign of the cemetery with its name and whatever it has, if there is one there, to help document its location. Okay. Family Bible, again, we've talked about this, but I wanted to go through some of the details because this is not only the Bible, any other family sources. So again, everything on this page is exactly out of policy 5.4000. So family Bibles are certainly at the top of the list, but there are times where you will be able to find letters from different people. I successfully did a proof argument a year or two ago because they had a couple letters that fortunately detailed in the letter that whoever was writing it talked about Aunt Martha, Uncle Ed, that kind of thing that not only gave names, but provided information on what the relationships were and helped us establish a indirect lineage where we didn't have any direct information. Copies of records, always this applies. Copies of the actual records are better evidence than transcriptions or abstracts. If you have the Bible or any other book, title pages, need that. And there is an option for the applicant to provide evidence and analysis depending on what information is there and when it was written and that kind of thing. But it's less used, but certainly is acceptable if the proper conditions exist. Another area under 5.400, local church and governmental records. I mean, this starts all the way from the actual vital records that we've talked about, birth records, death records, marriage records. Probate and land records can often be very useful in proving relationships, especially, I mean, if you have a probate of a will or somebody has a will, it can be very useful in establishing I give such and such to my son or to my daughter, that type of thing. Church records are very good also. The key point here, and I think I talked about it the other day, last week, was if you have a church record, you might need some extra pages to cover everything. So I've seen them where you want to have a clergy person and a date. You may have to go back to a couple of pages to your actual page of record to say, because they may just say, okay, as of this date, Father so-and-so or Reverend so-and-so started performing these things. And then they don't give the clergy's name on every page. So you have to go back a little bit. Or they may have last name. If it's a common last name, they'll put it down once, and then they're putting down just first names, and you have to go back and pick up that page to make sure you establish what the last name is. And always other institutional records, hospitals, funeral homes, cemeteries, any kind of an institution that has maintained solid records is a candidate for you to find information from. And then the big one. Oh, nope, I got one more. Newspaper accounts and affidavits. Again, kind of like the newspaper accounts are kind of like the tombstone. Needs to be contemporary with the event and the people. Somebody write it in a newspaper account that 100 years ago this happened. It's not going to carry a lot of weight. On the other hand, and something with affidavits, if somebody has personal knowledge of relationships or places, that can be useful. Again, it may need to be a direct statement, notarized, that type of thing. The stronger you can make it, the more chance you have of getting it accepted as a proof. Now we get to the big one. Publish local histories and family genealogies. Now, again, the first part's 5.4000, admissible evidence. The underlining is mine just to give a little emphasis there. You can have published books, and you need to provide a title page, date of publication, and any pages with pertinent information about sources. We talked before about some books will have their footnotes or their source information at the back of the book. That's fine, but you need to have copies of it. If they happen to do footnotes on the bottom of each page, you've got yourself covered. And a key point that I argue with. I respond to people all the time when they say, hey, wait a minute. This book got accepted over here. Why won't they accept this thing over here that I want? Just because it's considered valid in one area, it does not mean the entire book is considered acceptable. It depends on these type of things. And unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to do it, keep in mind that the staff genealogists are well trained in these, and they make the final decision subject to an appeal of what's acceptable. Now, the thing I try to keep reminding, and that's this bottom point, 3.5006. It seems to me I can't emphasize enough or often enough as to what's inadmissible. So again, this says published accounts, but underlined, if they're not contemporary with the persons who are being forwarded, they have to have sources that are admissible that can be determined. You can't have somebody just putting something and saying, well, they wrote it in here, it must be right, especially if it's family stuff. If they have sources or sources are, and they can be checked out, then it's possible. But you have to be very careful in using books, published books even, because they're not necessarily going to be acceptable just because they're published. And then I just added this one. I was actually looking for this for something else a couple of days ago. And this is out of the new application preparation guide, where they put together a very nice section. And I'll mention again, Dave Cook and a committee, I was on the subcommittee, but Dave Cook did a lot of work to try and organize it better and put similar information together, where sometimes in the old one it was spread around. So this is it rolls over on the page, but it's all in one subsection or section of a zone as inadmissible documents, pages bottom 19 and a little bit over onto 20 in the new guide. Keep this handy, because this tells you what you're not going to have be deemed acceptable. First one is the one that gets a little questionable sometimes. Unsourced newspaper articles are not acceptable proof. But SAR does like the obituaries and marriage announcements. Generally, those would be considered acceptable, even if you don't have the citation of the actual article. But I always tell people, try and make sure you can document the newspaper name, date, and page so that you have it sourced. Second one is back from a couple of pages. Published accounts that are not contemporary with the persons or events reported must have acceptable source citations. Undocumented family trees, I mentioned before, are not acceptable. And there's a host of others. I highlighted a couple more. Unpublished transcriptions of wills or other legal documents. Just because they're posted online does not make them proof if they were never published. And finally, this one's in the policy too. Index cards in general, Mennonite index cards are one that's mentioned specifically. Just because it's on an index card does not make it proof. You would have to find out what the actual proof is. Hopefully it's cited on your index card, and then you go after that piece of proof. And bottom line, again, pages from PRS and a number of the SAR and DAR online web pages are not acceptable. You need a record copy or copies of support documentation, things like that, to be admissible documents for your application. Okay, so now I'm going to go through. I just got a couple of slides here to talk a little bit. I know a lot of you have your preferred ways of doing applications and research, and I'm not here to tell you that you're doing it right or wrong. I'm just going to go through how I do it. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. I always consider that your way is the best way if it works for you, but maybe you get some ideas out of this, or if you don't have a way, maybe this is something to try. So first, I would have to say in general, and this is kind of where we try to use it in Michigan. In general, what we do is, since we require in Michigan that only the online application be used, one of our first steps is to suggest that the applicant go get a guest registry or guest user registration on SAR.org and start his own application using the online application form. This is basically going to that first screen where he creates an application and going to the basic info page where he puts in his address and that kind of stuff. We do not ask him to work on the lineage or the patriot stuff, but that gets it started, gives us his contact information. And then the key here is, if the applicant sets up the application, he can then go online and collaborate with you, or even just look at it and see how it's coming. And if he becomes a member, it's available to him in the future to use for, say, a supplemental. If he is not interested, I do have that asterisk down there, if he is capable and willing, and us, the registrars, genealogists, need to be flexible. If he isn't computer literate or just doesn't want to do it, it's fine, go ahead and do it yourself. But he needs to know that means, at least until the system gets improved upon, he will never be able to see that form or use it. He will either have to come back to me as the person who did it to do a supplemental for him, or he'll have to take his and type it all in himself to start a supplemental or one for his relative. So once that's started, then we can collaborate with him. Depends on how much they want to be involved. I'm sure you all know, some guys or their wives or whoever it is have a lot of information. Some have a little. Some want to help with the research. Some don't. We have to work through that. But one way I like to do it is you can start from the applicant and work backward towards his patriot ancestor, especially if he's willing to help out. I tell the applicant, go start getting birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, whatever you got on your newer generations, as far back as you can get them. That's great if we can, for whatever vital records we can find. Then we go to the patriot ancestor and work forward. Often this is where I'll start for him, because I'll go right back to my first two sources, DAR and SAR.org, and see if I can find the patriot ancestor in one of them, and accept it as a proven patriot. And if I get darn lucky, might even find one or two newer lineages going towards today. I may find an actual son or daughter, maybe even grandson or granddaughter, to get a few of the back ones. And then we have to fit in whatever's still missing in the middle. Now, I say that's kind of general. Here's a little more detail where I go into that. Again, where I'm saying, applicant, start with your birth certificate, make a decision on whether your spouse is going to have information in there or not, and to get those certificates. Go for yours, parents, grandparents, as far back as you can come up with records in your family. Some have a hard time coming up with any. Others, turns out they've got a genealogist in the family and they've got a whole bunch of them. And again, whether it's me or the other person, we can use Ancestry or Family Search to start filling in those areas. And like I said, I start with PRS and GRS for ancestors, and start looking for the old records that I have, or that I'm aware of. And we try to meet in the middle, and hopefully we don't get into that dead spot where we can't find anything. So couple points I want to leave you with on this. I hear people ask this, especially newer registrars and genealogists ask me all the time. So how much are we supposed to do for this applicant, and what should we tell them they need to do? So in my mind, there's 4 questions for you to think about for this process. First, what do you, as the SAR registrar or genealogist, want to contribute to this application process? And second question, what are you as the SAR registered genealogist capable of contributing to this process? Frankly, I'm not an outstanding genealogist. I have some skills, I've learned them along the way. I am not a genealogy expert, so I know I'm somewhat limited in what I can do. On the other hand, what do I want? What do you want the applicant to do to contribute to the process? Do you want them to stay out of your way, or do you want them to, do a whole lot of work, and if they don't do it, they're not going to get in? But just like me or you, what is the applicant capable of, or interested in doing? Maybe they're not capable for whatever reason. Maybe they have no interest. What you have to decide is, what's the balance between you and that applicant, and how much work are you willing to put in to that application? And when I say, what are you willing to put in that application, as far as I'm concerned, it's your choice. Remember, you're the volunteer. Nobody's paying you, even though you maybe got elected to this office, maybe you got appointed to the office, maybe you wanted it, maybe you got arm twisted into it. It's really, it's your life, you're volunteer. Hopefully you got other things in your life outside of SAR applications that you have to do. So what I tell, we discuss as a genealogy committee in Michigan is, you just have to decide how much are you willing to put into it, and how much do you expect the other person to put into it if needed to make it happen. And then the final point that I really have had a hard time with a couple of intended applicants, prospective members, is getting them to understand that it doesn't matter how patriotic they are or how much they want to get in SAR. There are just some people that don't have a qualifying patriot ancestor, or I'll call it qualifying lineage, that we just can't find sufficient records to tie them to the person that they're sure is their patriot ancestor. It may be a failure, but keep in mind, and again, a lot of you know this, but if you're newer, you may not. There are other resources to help you. Go back to and the applicant. There are a number of excellent genealogists that have allowed their names to be put on a web page on the SAR under genealogy, where they're willing to help people directly. And I don't remember how many it is, might be 8 or 10 or 12, but they each have next to their name those states or those areas where they feel they have some expertise and are especially willing to help somebody with their application. The other one, and I'm going to toss off this over to Gary as I finish this up, there is a committee of helpers. I don't remember it's a subcommittee of the genealogy committee, but they're willing to help. And basically they're there for you to say, call them up and say, hey, I got with this guy and we're down to this one link and we need help, or 2 links and we need help. And they're willing to go spend time and help you and your applicant find that missing middle, or find that one hole or that one link that you just can't come up with. So there are other resources. There are other SAR members that are willing to help around the country. We're not talking just in your chapter, your state. These are national resources to you, and keep that in mind. Like I said, some of the names are on sr.org, and I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to turn it over to Gary, and that maybe he can comment on that first as something that I know he's or Bill Schwetke, whoever feels up to answering that as to the name of that committee.
Well, thank you, Dennis. That was a good presentation, and I want to applaud everybody who participated in the chat. There was a lot of information passed on within the chat that what I'm going to try to do is to get the transcript of the chat and send that out so people can look at all the inputs, because there were additions from your own experiences that helped out. So I appreciate that effort. The fellow that is helping you beforehand is Chris Smithson from Maryland. They have a collaboration group, and you can get online with him, and you can just ask the questions and people will start to respond to you. John Schatzel is the fellow in Kansas who was offered to work as the genealogy committee of assistants, and he's offering to do that after you have done everything you can. You've sent to national and they pended it, and you're struggling. That's the time you go after John Schatzel and said, get me some help, find this thing for me so we can get this fella in. So John's kind of a crisis management type of committee. Chris Smithson is a prepare for it ahead of time and collaborate type of committee. So different venues to work with it. Okay, I'm gonna start looking. I've got 2 hands raised, and I've got to try to find them here. Where did we go? Okay, Bill Wilson, you're up. Please unmute yourself. Bill, unmute yourself first and then start over.
Just hold down the space bar. That will unmute.
There you go.
There we
Go
are.
ahead and start again.
I'm state registrar for South Carolina, and there's 2 terms that I've encountered in the genealogy manual that I wondered if somebody could expand a little bit for me. Both of them were mentioned by Dennis tonight. One was in the Bible listing discussion. There's a word in there it says authored. And I'm wondering how anybody in a Bible scenario could be authored, because usually it's entries through generations. So there is no author. And the second question I have is the word contemporary is used quite often. And I've never been able to lock down exactly what the SAR means by contemporary. Does it mean in the lifetime of the individual, 20 years after the individual, or something like that? And I've never been quite able to get that locked down in my mind. And I thought maybe somebody could help me.
Well, I'm open to anybody else, because my understanding of contemporaneous is nobody's going to tell you.
That's exactly what I thought.
Now, you said something about authored.
Under the
the author. Okay, I'm looking at my slide here, and it may be a little bit confusing. It isn't a policy, but when it says author, it says family records, including the Bible. Now, obviously, the Bible doesn't have a given author,
right?
But if there's a genealogist, or if it's a letter written by somebody, that would be the author.
Okay, it's only used in that context, not in the context of the listing of the individuals and their birth and death dates. And usually in old Bibles, they have listings.
Right. No, that's
nothing.
No, although what they do there is they're looking for, and I think I mentioned before, I had a problem. So my great grandmother, her husband and or young son gave her a family Bible in 1862.
Mm-hmm.
And it says mother right on the end piece and all of that. And over the next 5 years, in the same handwriting, several generations were put in.
Okay,
That was accepted as information, as acceptable proof, even though it did not say, there was no way of telling who that person was. There are some words in there in the policy that kind of says if you can document through some other letter or something that who it is, that's great. But I never had a problem with that. The problem I had was when somebody came along 80 years later and put stuff from the 1930s and 40s in there in a different handwriting. That was not acceptable because it was not contemporaneous with the publication of the Bible.
may I ask one other question? And
Sure.
it's here right today. It has to go back to the contemporary statement. I have a family history that was published originally in 1861, then in 1906, and the current version is not was 1966. Is that considered contemporary for the information that I want to withdraw from that?
I think you would have to be able to prove that it was information. My opinion would be just, maybe if Denise Hall's on, she can, or Deborah can talk to it if they're on. The problem would be if it says 1966 and it doesn't clearly show which is from which version, you might have a problem. I've also seen some that said, okay, second edition covers from here to here. The 1966 edition covers from here to here. If it somehow clarified what was the original information, I think you'd be okay. But if there's no way to know what if it was changed or not, I think that might be an issue.
Thank you, Dennis. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, Ralph Nelson, one of the questions came up, I think, on your comment. What is SARGENE?
Okay, well, I put an answer to that up on the web. I was training a person to take over as registrar for our chapter and put together some helpful notes and for him. And when it became apparent that there was a general need for that sort of thing, I converted that into a website that is available to people who know what the URL is. And I sent the URL out several times on the chat box there. Most recently, it's probably still on your chat box if you want to click on that. And so that's what that is. And it covers the issues that we're talking today and focuses on the mechanics of how you prepare the application and get it adjusted to the page properly and so on, and lists a large number of resources for Revolutionary War material and genealogical material, some of which are covered here and some of which are beyond that. Of course, there are infinite number of sources out there, but so
Okay.
that's what that is.
Thank you. Dave Robeson, Massachusetts.
Well, thank you for taking this. Just a few things. First of all, I do lots and lots and lots of Zoom meetings, so I've got all these little tips and tricks. If you're like right now, I didn't have to unmute myself. I'm holding down the space bar. And when I release the space bar, I'll go back to mute. So that just makes it easy so you're not hunting around looking for that little tiny microphone. Second thing I just want to mention is in the chat, before you end this meeting, if you open up the chat box and where it says type message here, there's 3 little dots. And if you click those 3 little dots, it'll say save chat.
Hold your space bar down, Dave.
You muted yourself.
I sure did. My finger slipped off the space bar. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm talking about the I don't know where I left off here, but if you wanted to save the chat, you open up the chat, go to the area where you would add a chat, but there's 3 little dots there. And if you click on the 3 little dots, the thing will say save chat. If you save chat, it'll go to your documents folder under the name of whatever this particular meeting is. But it makes it real easy to keep, if there's lots and lots and lots of notes today, so it works pretty easy. And with regard to URLs, Bruce Taylor put his URL in the chat. So when this happens, and I do this dozens of times, you just simply click on the link right there in the chat box. It'll flip over to a web page to that URL, and then you can just click back to the meeting. You won't lose anything. You won't lose anything anybody has said while you're off doing this. Then when the meeting is over, the URL is sitting right there. You can save it. You can do whatever you want with it. But that's, I mean, I just do that all the time because I share a lot of URLs with everybody. But it's thank you for the SAR, Gene, because that was one of my questions. I've seen it over and over, but I hadn't seen I hadn't connected this my LOMD with SAR, Gene. But anyway, I'm good. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
you.
Ralph, and I appreciate the safe chat item. I was not aware of that myself. Appreciate it.
Gary Gillette asked the only question that we had tonight that didn't get a good answer. And I'm going to ask you to ask it again, Gary, if you will, and maybe we'll get somebody to answer.
Yeah, I actually have two questions. The one I put on the chat was, is it possible that the SAR can negotiate a special rate with Ancestry.com rather than, because every time I talk to them, you know, they got one flat rate. And they don't care who we are or how many people we have, you know, using them. And I don't know about the DAR, whether they have a special rate. But has anybody ever talked to them?
The only person that I've heard who has talked with Ancestry and gotten anything out of it was Joe Dooley, when he negotiated that the Ancestry would scan all our applications and then they would give the scan back to us. And so that was how they got their online applications, their pre-1970 stuff online. But they scanned everything up to 2012 and then gave it to us in hard drives. I have not heard anybody negotiating after that. Bill Schwecke, do you have any concepts on that?
Just a couple comments. That's a good idea, and I've heard that before, and we haven't done anything about it, and we should. Matter of fact, I'm talking to Ancestry right now, negotiating door prizes for a genealogy workshop done by my local chapter, and I'll bring that question to them and see what they say.
Yeah, because we ought to have a little bit of clout with the amount of people that are using Ancestry. My second question then, Gary, you mentioned this John fellow that would help us do some research. Do you have a contact for him, an email address or something, or could you post it for us? I
did. I sent that out in the first newsletter that I sent out, and it's online right now. John Schatzel is the fellow, and it's called the Genealogist General Forum #1, or excuse me, the newsletter from #1. But I'll send that back out to you so that you can see it, and it has Chris Smithson's information on there as well.
Terrific. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Steve Miller, you're up. You made it.
Yeah, I have a question about the Northampton County, Pennsylvania tax records that John Sinks went and copied all of them. I needed to go through and peruse those to try and see if a Patriot was there. I went to genealogy. I went down. I got to where it said Pennsylvania tax records. I click on that and nothing comes up. How do they have a reader or anything for it? Nothing seems to come up.
And this is on the SAR website?
Yes.
Yeah, it's on the SAR website under the genealogy stuff. Maybe you could, Gary, just send a note to Mick Pitzer and have him make sure it's not messed up.
What do you remember the title, Steve?
It's the Pennsylvania tax record something or other. Hang on.
Yeah.
It's Northampton County.
Northampton County.
And there are basically two sets of records. Some
I
years
hear a
ago,
familiar name or sound.
some years ago, I photographed all but 4 townships in Northampton County. I ran out of time, and the subcommittee went through all of those records, identifying which ones provided evidence of service. with there were 4 townships that were loose ends. I didn't get to them. And Cindy Weatherby of Florida and I were talking, and she said, well, gee, I'll order the copies. So she did. We worked with the Northampton County Archives. It turned out that only 3 of the townships had records during the Revolution. Some had before and after, one had before and after, but not during the Revolution. And the subcommittee needs to be revitalized so we can go through those remaining townships. Some of them are very easy. They have the word supply tax in the title. But there are a few that are going to be harder to make determinations on. But most are fairly easy. And SAR as a whole does not have copies of those. I have copies of them. And as I said, the tax list subcommittee needs to be revitalized and get going on this, because we're almost finished with all of these Northampton records that are not in the state archives. They're not any place but the Northampton County Archives.
And just one other point, this is Dennis, for person asking that question. I just pulled up the site and I was able to get to those tax lists, so you might want to try again. I had no trouble coming up with I just went to the tax record page and clicked on the big yellow box that says Northampton, and it came right up. So appears to be working to me now.
Harry Rinker, we haven't heard from you in a week.
Yes, that's true.
You're limited to 2 questions tonight, Harry.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to comment about the Northampton County Archives. I've done a great deal of research work there myself. The archivists there are very friendly. If you'll send them the name of the person, they'll run the tax records for you. I think it's like $5 a search and 50 cents a page. And I don't know how many of my ancestors I had to do it, but boy, for the amount of time they put in and what they charge, it's cheap. But what I really wanted to talk about was Scribners. Now, those of you who are unfamiliar with the Pennsylvania Bibles and the birth and baptismal certificates, there was a group of school teachers and others called Scribners that traveled from farm to farm to farm from the end of the 18th century all the way through the 1850s and 60s. That would stop at a farm for a day or two, fill in the family Bible, fill in the certificates, and then move on. And they often signed their names on the pages of the family records. If you find a family record with a Scribner's name on it, the Pennsylvania German Society and others have done enormous amounts of research on those people, and they can pinpoint the time they were there probably within a couple of years. So I just want you to understand that, if you find an odd name on a family Bible page, chances are that that's an illiterate school teacher or somebody that came in and filled that Bible in for that family that could not. And that could be a very valuable tool to date it.
Thank you, Harry. Ron Bearden.
Thank you, Gary. I just want to say thank you to you and to anybody else who's involved in getting access to all the state registrars for the old SAR approved applications. I can see where that is already going to be a great benefit to state registrars. And I wondered if you had any kind of idea when we might extend that ability to the chapter registrars.
I asked Mike Scroggins, who's basically the gatekeeper in this. He wants to see positive results out of opening it up to the state points of contact. He is concerned that we'll start getting applications in showing that they've stolen this material and put it in for the application. That was why I put that caveat in there. Don't send in stuff that says it came from from the PRS that you have access to. The other part of it is, it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think that's my goal, is to get it down to the chapter registrar. I haven't got anybody on board quite yet at national, but I just have to talk loud and hard.
Okay, I've already sent the word out to the folks in Alabama that if they have a 2005 or 2010 application that they want to look at to see if it might be acceptable beyond the acceptability of the 2012s,
Right.
let me know and I'll be glad to look at it. The other thing I wanted to mention to Dennis, there were a couple of areas tonight, and when you mentioned some of the resources that I want to share with you, Dennis. And so I'll contact you this week with a couple of things about ancestry, probate records, the catalog section and family search, and also looking for genealogical material in the pension applications. And I'll get with you to talk with you about that. And then if you think it worthy enough, if you have time in one of the sessions, you may just touch lightly on that to show everybody how to access some of this information.
All right, appreciate that, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Frank Ellison.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment about the ancestry, the cut rate for ancestry.com. My wife is a local chapter registrar in Kentucky and has been for numerous years. And I kind of use her access to Ancestry. But to her knowledge, there is no special rate for DAR. And she's never had access to a special rate, nor has anyone in her chapter that she knows of.
Thank you. Appreciate that information. John Rose, Seymour, Texas.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
I have a very good working relationship with a former registrar of the local DAR chapter, and now she's some kind of big wig in the state DAR. She's phenomenal researcher. She's very diligent, and she helps us with our applications through our local chapter. And she does this for the credit that she gets for the finder recognition. She does not like the online application, and I'm concerned that when we eventually move to the all online application, we're going to lose her participation at least as much as she had been before. Is there a way for chapters that work with DAR registrars to get these DAR helpers accounts where they can have edit privileges on the applications to help these new recruits and supplementals complete the application in a correct format?
The only workaround that I know at this point, and we do have a couple of occasions of that, is if the husband is a SAR member, then he has access and he might be able to offer his wife access through that. We have not had anything that says, oh geez, we would just want somebody in to work on this information on the online system. I'll caveat that with yet. We haven't asked that question. So
the catch, if I understand this correctly, is the husband would have to have edit access to other people's records as well. So they would have to be a registrar.
that would be true. That would be true. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Bill Schwecke, do you have any last comments that you'd like to pass on?
I did see Bob Sapp with his hand up.
Did he? Okay, I'm sorry, Bob.
Did you
Go
still have
ahead.
something, Bob?
I don't know whether I'm on or not, am I?
Yes, go.
Okay, basically Pennsylvania, Northampton County, a summary has been made of all the individuals of Northampton County that took the oath of allegiance in 1778 and 77 time frame. I have a copy of it. I also understand Bucks County has got the same thing. I do not have a copy of that. You might want to see if you can find it. And also from the standpoint of Ancestry.com, you can get a special rate, at least at one time you could, if you're a member of NGS. Am I still there?
Yep, you're still good.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
I have nothing else, Gary.
Okay. Dennis, any last minute inputs?
No, thanks. Appreciate everybody's time again tonight.
Okay, and
Two more weeks to go.
yeah, next week is genealogical proof argument. I won't bait and switch you again. We'll get to it. It's the thing to do. Thank you for everybody's participation. We had 101 people, very well supported, and I'll try to get this chat. If you can't save it, let me know and I'll send it to you. Have a good night.
Thank you.